The ash did not fall like weather. It carried intent. That was the first thing I recorded. Not dust from manufacturing stacks, nor fallout from ancient wars, but whispers, sifted through every drifting moat, aligned in the Ben-Herrick cadence. The men did not notice at first. They only pulled their rebreathers tighter, cursed the sting in their eyes, complained of skin irritation. But I heard it. A commissar learns to listen. A commissar learns to separate blasphemy from static. We came to Jurithus for his liberators. Though the world was long since abandoned by imperial charts, the 132nd Vostroyan Regiment had been redeployed here under sealed orders. With Mechanicus escort and ecclesiarchal blessing, our charge, investigate the reported flesh cults that had seized Manufactoria and silenced astropathic traffic. The world had been ash wastes and refinery spires for 10 millennia, obedient and silent. The silence had broken, and what emerged from it was neither rebellion nor simple heresy. Within our planet side, I saw the impossible. The shrine in the Hap Spire's ruined square bore the sigil of the Omnissiah, cogtooth halo encircling the machine skull. But where iron had once held, something else pulsed. Muscle fibers stretched across the cog, flexing faintly, as though breathing. No priest of Mars had carved it. No loyal servant would ever dare such profanity. I ordered flamers readied. The adepts forbade it, citing unknown sanctity. Already, division festered. Our Auspex units gave erratic results. Every guardsman's biometric ping registered elevated heart rate, sometimes to lethal levels. Yet the men stood calm, some even still. Sergeant Collian's readout displayed cardiac arrest, though he spoke beside me. I watched him thump his chest, swearing he felt nothing amiss. The Medicaid recorded it as equipment error. Still, I logged it. It was no error. Something unseen already paced our veins. I forced the regiment into parade formation. Order amidst uncertainty, ritual to bind fear. Boots sank into ash that rose in small plumes around each step. The wind carried it back down upon us, coating our flak armor in a pale sheen. And beneath the constant hiss of ash against ceramite, I could hear the Ben-Herrick pulse. Oath-bound, one by one, over and over. Like a heartbeat buried beneath language. At dusk, we reached the first half-block perimeter. Doors hung open, furniture dragged into streets, stripped of metal. Civilians were gone, not dead, not burned, not devoured, simply absent. But the walls bore marks, the same shape, repeated, a crude numeral 17, gouged into stone, scrawled in blood, painted in ash. I counted 23 of these marks before forcing myself to stop. Numbers themselves can form prayers if repeated with enough fervor. Psychers in our escort began to cough blood. They reported sensations of hands at their throats whenever they tried to speak aloud. One collapsed mid-sentence, tongue protruding as if gripped by invisible force. The Mechanicus logged interference, claimed atmospheric anomalies. But I knew it for what it was, the warp pressing against the skin of the world. I executed the psyker by bolt round. Better the Emperor take him clean than the cult find use for his flesh, the men whispered already. Some swore they saw figures moving in the ash, flayed silhouettes, arms raised in benediction. Others claimed to hear voices of kin long dead, spoken from shadows. I struck one soldier for disobedience, for covering his ears during drill. Discipline must remain absolute. Fear spreads faster than heresy, and in truth they are the same thing. Night descended in crimson haze, manufacturing stacks burning slow fires in the horizon. The ash storm thickened until sight fell to 20 paces. I ordered perimeter lanterns lit, their glow smothered by the red haze. We held position within the square. The shrine's living muscle pulsed faintly all night. No birds called, no vermin stirred. A silence complete, like the world itself holding its breath. At 0300, our Voxnet flared. Operator Hask's voice cut short in mid-report. His last word, present. What followed was not silence, nor static, but the sound of lips moving wetly, amplified, multiplied, ranged into rhythm. Not human speech, not animal noise. A chant, oath-bound. One by one, the voice of my Vox officer joined it, stretched and layered until indistinguishable from the storm itself. I approached the shrine before dawn, unable to resist. Its cogtooth halo had spread, stretching further across stone, growing veins like roots. I placed a hand upon it. Warmth radiated through my glove, not mechanical warmth, not friction, the warmth of living tissue. The shrine pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and in that thrum, for the space of a breath, I felt my own heart stutter, skip. As if falling into cadence with something older, I withdrew at once, logged the contact, ordered the square sealed. But even now, my chest feels heavy. The pulse lingers, slow and insistent. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. My first record. Durithis is not dead. It breathes, and it whispers to us in the ash. Dawn broke as a dim ember through the red haze. The ash storm never ceased. It only shifted in density, as though breathing in tandem with the manufacturing ruins. Our advance took us along the outer Hab districts, where the spires slouched under centuries of soot. I ordered the platoons into staggered patrols, with Auspex coverage along every flank. The reports returned fragmented. Heat signatures flared where no bodies stood. Structure seemed to warp in scale. Corridors that measured 20 meters collapsed into 5 once entered. Mechanicus adepts insisted the cogitators must be misaligned. I knew better. The city itself was folding around us. The first discovery came in the form of bodies without flesh. They were not flayed by crude blades, nor burned by fire. Their bones gleamed as if polished, every sinew removed with surgical reverence. These skeletons had been arranged upright, nailed to Hab walls in perfect procession, each bent in prayer. Finger bones pressed against jawless skulls, locked in silent devotion. Blood had pooled beneath them once, long dried into patterns like calligraphy. I counted 17 in the first hall. Always 17. Each corpse angled just slightly toward the next, as if whispering down a chain. Sergeant Coyan muttered catechisms under his breath until I struck him silent. Words have power here, and careless mouths feed it. We moved further inward. More processions revealed themselves, bone lattices arching like church vaults, rib cages woven into frameworks above streets. The wind whistled through them, producing a hollow tone disturbingly close to him. Guardsmen clutched their weapons tighter, shoulders tense. Fear stiffened their formation more than my commands ever could. The psychers complained again. One screamed he could feel skin sliding from his face, though his features remained intact. Another bit clean through his tongue, blood spilling down his robes. Eyes wide as though someone else forced the act. I executed him immediately. A commissar must teach that mercy lies in the bolt round, not in indulgence. Still, his corpse twitched unnaturally long after. The civilians we encountered were worse than corpses. They were alive, yet hollow, standing motionless in lines outside manufacturing doors. They wore no expressions, only vacant calm. Their flesh bore cuts in deliberate geometries, squares, circles, spirals, but no blood flowed from the wounds. They spoke when addressed, always the same words. The oath keeps us whole. Any attempt to move them caused resistance far beyond normal strength. One soldier snapped his wrist, trying to drag a child aside. The child did not even blink. At 1400, we reached a collapsed transit station. Here, I noticed something that unsettled me more than any flayed bone. Vox static throbbed in rhythm with the men's own heartbeats. Each soldier's pulse aligned with the others, as if linked to a common metronome. When one guardsman stumbled, all of them went simultaneously. I logged this carefully. It was not morale. It was contagion of the soul. Night fell again, without warning, the storm darkening until lumen lamps became useless. I ordered silence. The wind howled, carrying something more than ash. A low murmur threaded through, neither High Gothic nor Ben Herrick, yet containing aspects of both. The Mechanicus adepts swore they heard binary bursts, fragments of old litanies to the Omnissiah. The chaplain claimed he heard hymns of the ecclesiarchy, though each ended in unfamiliar phrases. The truth was worse. It was both at once. Flesh praying to machine, machine echoing flesh. We bivouacked in the hollow shell of the transit station. Lanterns guttered, their glow eaten by the ash. Guardsmen wrapped cloaks tighter, though the temperature did not fall. In fact, it rose. I felt sweat beat along my neck, though Auspex confirmed external temperature at -12. The heat was not in the air. It came from within us. At 0317, Operator Haas vanished. He had been seated against a pillar, Vox beats still active, transmitting contact updates in his steady monotone. The feed did not cease. It continued broadcasting, but the words no longer came from him. His bead lay intact upon the ground, slick with condensation. I replayed the recording. His voice remained, shifted half a tone lower, reciting coordinates none of us had transmitted. Behind his words, another sound grew clearer the longer I listened. Wet lips moving, smacking, forming syllables to slow for speech. The regiment stirred, whispering their own interpretations. Some thought it chewing, others kissing. I heard chanting. We searched the station. No signs of struggle, no prints in ash, no trail of departure. Hask was unmade without witness. My men looked to me for explanation, for assurance. I gave none. I only told them the truth. He had broken discipline. His flesh had gone to the oath. That was enough to silence them, though fear now rippled unspoken. The adepts compiled the coordinates Hask's voice had delivered. They pointed not to the surface ruins, but to deep manufacturing tunnels far beneath our feet, dormant furnaces, sealed vaults, catacombs where no light had burned in centuries. There, perhaps, the cult hid its heart. There, perhaps, protocol awaited us. I'd ordered preparations for descent at first light, if light would ever come again. My men slept uneasily, if at all, each muttering under their breath as though arguing with unseen figures. I felt it too, a pressure at the edge of thought, whispering numbers, 17 and 17 again. I pressed bolt pistol to my temple once, just to silence it. The pressure retreated, but never vanished. This is Commissar Varin, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. Second record, the cult does not kill, it collects. Flesh is procession. Flesh is him, and we are already marching in step. The tunnel swallowed us whole. We descended by rusted lifts, their chains groaning under the regiment's weight. The further we sank, the more the walls wept condensation. It was not water. It smelled of copper and clung like oil. Guardsmen spat and cursed as droplets slid into their rebreathers. I marked it in my log as industrial runoff. Even as I wrote it, I knew it for what it was, the sweat of something alive beneath the manufactorum. The coordinates the Vox officer had broadcast led us into a spire's central shaft. The stonecrete walls should have borne only conduit lines and rusted piping. Instead, they were etched with cuts resembling sutures. Each stitch-like mark was painted with dried blood, arranged in spirals. When our lumen lamp struck them, the spirals seemed to rotate. My men averted their eyes. I forced them forward. To pause is to let fear dictate. To move is to retain command. We reached the junction chamber after 4 hours. Here, the air vibrated, not with machinery, but with voices. Litanies carried from hidden speakers recessed into the walls. The tones wove High Gothic and Ben Herrick into the same syllables, alternating so quickly that no human tongue could replicate it. It should have sounded like dissonant overlap. Instead, it was harmonious. Worse than harmonious, it was beautiful. The hymn carried the rhythm of prayer yet bled into a cadence of flesh. The words spoke of sanctity not in the emperor nor the omnissiah, but in the skin itself. Preserve the sheath, that memory be eternal. Strip the vessel, that oath be fulfilled. The adepts recoiled, chanting counter canticles. The chaplain dropped to his knees, hands clamped to ears. His lips moved in desperate denial, but his body rocked in time to the hymn. I admit, so did mine. Civilians lingered in the chamber, dozens, perhaps more. They stood in circles, hands clasped together, eyes shut. Their bodies bore carvings, numbers, geometries, and oaths burned into skin. None resisted our presence. When ordered to disperse, they simply answered, "The oath keeps us whole." Always the same phrase. I shot one through the skull to test their resolve. The others did not flinch. They resumed their stillness, blood soaking into the ash beneath them. As if nothing had changed, a lieutenant attempted to silence the speakers. He pried one free, finding not metal, but cartilage beneath the grill. It twitched at his touch. When he cut deeper, blood spurted. The entire hymn wavered, dipping into static, before correcting itself. The lieutenant dropped his weapon and vomited inside his mask. I marked him for discipline, though none followed through. We all knew it would make no difference. The hymn's effect deepened the longer we listened. My log entries falter here. Words slant into half-prayers, phrases repeating. I found myself writing in cadence, recording tactical observations as though they were liturgy. 17 men to a squad, 17 steps to formation, 17 shots to cleanse the heretic. I had not issued such orders aloud, yet the men began adopting them regardless, aligning to invisible doctrine. Even my own voice, when giving commands, slipped into rhythm without intent. The psychers raved. One tore out his nails against the wall, screaming that he could hear skin crawling across the ceiling. Another began biting at his forearm, chewing strips until his teeth snapped. When restrained, he spat the flesh into a pattern, numerals forming 17 again. I executed both. Bold rounds echoed through the hymn. It did not falter. Mechanicus Auspex detected coordinates buried deeper still, hidden in the hymn's binary overlay. I authorized a new descent. The adepts insisted the hymn was transmitting data, not words. They claimed it contained star charts, strings of code, perhaps protocols long forbidden. I corrected them. It was prayer. Whether data or words, prayer is prayer when men obey it. Before we departed, I forced the last survey of the chamber. The civilians opened their eyes in unison. Their irises glowed faint red in the lumen glare. They spoke together. The oath keeps us whole. Their voices wove into the hymn, seamless. As though rehearsed for centuries, my men tightened their grips on Laskins. None fired. We all knew instinctively to kill one was to add to the choir. As we withdrew, a new sound emerged. The Vox officer's voice, lost to us, joined the hymn. But it did not speak in sync. It came 7 seconds late, repeating phrases already finished. I replayed the Vox log thrice to confirm. Delay where no delay should exist. That meant he had spoken before the hymn itself, pre-recorded somehow by a ritual outside time. Or worse, he was still speaking, caught in a loop where past and present collapsed. We left the chamber with every man's spine crawling. The hymn followed us through the tunnels, humming through stone, rattling in our teeth. Even when the speaker ceased, we still heard it. We still hear it now. This is Commissar Varin, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. Third record. The flesh does not rot here. It remembers. It sings. And we are learning its hymn. The air grew hotter as we pressed lower. Vents once meant to channel manufacturum exhaust now breathed heat like lungs. It smelled of scorched marrow. Every intake of breath rasped in my chest. The Auspex read no industrial source. This was not machine heat. It pulsed, rising and falling in intervals. We were descending into a body. The stairwells curved unnaturally, no longer cut from stonecrete, but carved with grooves mimicking cartilage. At intervals, arches rose over our heads. In a lumen's glare, they gleamed white, rib-like. Some of the younger guardsmen muttered that we were walking down the throat of a colossus, buried beneath the city. I ordered silence. Still, the thought clung to me, every step pressed deeper into bone. The adepts confirmed our surroundings were not metal nor stone. Scans returned fluctuating readings, shifting between biological and inorganic. They whispered among themselves of bioceramic hybridization. I cut them short. Words meant nothing. We knew the truth by sight. The manufacturum's foundations had been replaced with something that was never built, but grown. Civilians accompanied us still. Not captives, not freed prisoners. They followed in silence, barefoot. Each step left faint trails of blood, yet they did not falter. Their lips moved constantly, reciting the same phrase, "The oath keeps us whole." Some were missing fingers, ears, even eyes. None bled from those wounds. Instead, their skin stretched across hollows like thin wax, sealing gaps where flesh should not heal. My men tried to drive them back. They would not leave. We carried them with us, whether we willed it or not. At the 6th level down, the first casualty occurred. Trooper Varnick's Auspex unit detected movement along the ceiling. He raised his weapon, but nothing was there. Moments later, his bones broke from the inside, one after another, snapping audibly, punching through his skin until his body resembled a sack of jagged white. He screamed only once. Then he collapsed, ribs thrust outward like spines. His corpse quivered. The hymn began to hum louder from within him, as though his chest cavity had become a speaker. The men were shaken. I reminded them, fear is heresy. But when I ordered them to incinerate the body, the flames would not catch. His skin blistered, but did not blacken. His flesh did not consume. The chaplain declared it a sign of sanctity, not corruption. I told him to hold his tongue. None obeyed the order to burn. We left Varnick where he lay, his chest still vibrating with song. The further we went, the more the architecture betrayed us. The stairwell flattened into a corridor. Along its walls, indentations formed. At first they seemed decorative, carved niches. But as we passed, the truth revealed itself. They were sockets, empty cavities shaped perfectly to cradle human forms. Some were already filled. Civilians, soldiers, even what looked like ancient Mechanicus adepts, stood pressed into the bone, bodies absorbed until only their faces remained visible. Their mouths moved in time with the hymn. Their eyes rolled endlessly upward. They lived. They endured. They sang. One of the men struck a socketed figure with his bayonet. The blade sank easily, but no blood emerged. The figure's lips parted, and the hymn swelled, overpowering even the lumen pack's static hum. We fled the corridor without further provocation. I do not call it cowardice. I call it survival. By the time we reached the 8th level, the heat became unbearable. Rebreathers failed. Filters clogged with ash. My log records gaps here, Paragraphs lost to delirium. I recall men stripping off armor, claiming it burned their skin. Some carved into themselves, whispering they needed to let the hymn breathe. Discipline collapsed in places. I executed 3 on the spot to steady morale. The shots echoed strangely, reverberating not down the corridor, but into the walls. As though fired into lungs. It was then the ribcage revealed itself fully. The chamber opened wide, impossible in scale. We stood upon a catwalk suspended across a void. Beneath us stretched rows of colossal ribs, curving inward like the remains of a slain titan. But unlike dead bone, these moved. They flexed gently, expanding and contracting. Each motion exhaled heat across the chamber, striking our faces in waves. We realized then we were inside something still alive. The Mechanicus adepts attempted to measure the scale. Their Auspex screamed with static. Vox signals warped. The hymn merged with the interference, whispering through the static, preserve the sheath, strip the vessel, fulfill the oath. One adept tore off his mechadendrites in despair. Another fell to his knees, praising the structure as a forgotten relic of the Omnissiah. I had them restrained. Faith had become madness here. There was no line between the two. We crossed the catwalk in silence. Civilians followed, their footsteps in rhythm with ours, as though drilled to our pace. One stumbled and fell. His body struck the rib below. The rib shuddered. The entire chamber trembled in response. For a heartbeat, I thought it would collapse. But no, it only exhaled harder, the heat rising to unbearable levels. The fallen civilian did not splatter. His body dissolved into the rib, absorbed like water in the cloth. His face lingered faintly in the bone, mouth parted in eternal chant. When we reached the far side, I ordered the bridge cut, but the men hesitated. Cutting it meant stranding us with no retreat, and though none spoke it, I could see the same truth in their eyes that haunted mine. Retreat was already impossible. Whatever lay above was no safer than what lay below. We pressed on. At the chamber's far end stood a door, not steel, nor ceramite, a slab of fused vertebrae locked together into a barrier. Symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly, as though veins carried blood behind the bone. The civilians pressed their foreheads to it, murmuring, "The oath keeps us whole." Then the hymn ceased. Total silence. Our ears rang with its absence. Even our hearts seemed aloud. The slab began to part, not like a door, but like jaws opening. Beyond lay only blackness, deep and absolute. The civilians entered first, one by one, vanishing into void. My men raised weapons, but their hands shook too violently to fire. I gave the order to advance. I write these words before we step inside. If this is my last entry, know this: we are walking willingly into a mouth. The darkness inside the vertebrae slab was not absence. It was presence, thick, palpable, breathing. The lumen lamps flickered and died within moments of entry. Rebreather screamed, pulling in stale, iron-sweet air. I forced the regiment forward, though every step felt as if the floor itself resisted our passage. The hymn had returned, not in speakers, not in voices, but in vibration. Walls, floor, even the air trembled with it. The sound carried memory. We encountered the first true horrors within 50 paces. Skins, not corpses, not bodies, but walking, twitching flesh. They moved upright, human in shape, yet grotesque in detail. Eyes floated beneath thin membranes, mouths whispered, sometimes screaming, sometimes singing. Limbs detached and reattached without hesitation. They mimicked our soldiers in pose and gesture. Guards fired. Lost bolts licked through them only to see them recoil, splitting and fusing like wet clay. They were memories given form. A corporal screamed when he recognized his own twin within the throng of skins. His twin had died during the descent yesterday. The corporal was shaken, fell to his knees, and tried to reason. The skin that resembled his brother smiled faintly. The corporal did not survive the encounter. Not in body, at least. His skin detached, slid across the chamber to join the chorus, now for voices strong. I ordered the regiment to suppress their terror. Discipline is survival. Obedience is survival. Still, horror cannot be beaten by will alone. The civilians we had carried along entered the fray. They did not flee, did not resist. They seemed to guide the skins, orchestrating their movements, pressing them to mimic tactical formations we had used in drills. I recognized the strategy, movement patterns from our own regiment, mirrored by the skins. Every man who felt contributed his voice, his memory, to the collective consciousness. Each loss strengthened the enemy. Each death was rehearsed in advance. I attempted to record observations, Every entry devolved into liturgy, a cadence imposed by the oath. Words like 17 and him repeated compulsively. Each time I noted the number 17, I felt it resonate in my own chest. I realized then, this number was not mere coincidence. 17 men per squad, 17 steps in formation, 17 sounds to complete the hymn. The regiment was unknowingly composed into the cult's ritual. Attempts at destruction failed. Flamers ignited, turning some skins into molten tatters. Yet they reformed within minutes, fused with one another, voices overlapping. One skin cried out in the corporal's voice, then morphed seamlessly into the Vox officer's tone, reciting previously intercepted coordinates. The hymn persisted, layered and expanding. It was not sound alone. It was command, memory, and doctrine fused into flesh. I executed several soldiers who hesitated, not for cowardice, but to maintain structure. Each bold round echoed in the chamber, feeding the hymn in ways I did not yet comprehend. My own voice joined commands I had not given, and men obeyed as if I had spoken aloud. Discipline had become ritual, ritual had become survival, and survival was meaningless in the face of the oath. The Mechanicus adepts attempted to scan the skins. Their auspexes failed, overloading and collapsing circuits. One adept whispered a warning about resonance. The flesh was transmitting psionic echoes, broadcasting memory into the warp. I noted the location, recorded the phenomenon, but made no attempt to explain. Observation alone was dangerous. Interpretation would bind the observer. We moved cautiously through the chamber, following corridors that twisted unnaturally. Skins shifted with us, always ahead, always behind, creating the illusion of enclosure. Though the passage widened and contracted with the same breath, voices of the lost soldiers whispered tactical orders, sometimes familiar, sometimes garbled. Every command issued by a man who had fallen now belonged to the oath. Nothing remained private. At the chamber's far end, a wall of stitched corpses rose like a tapestry. 17 faces in a row, mouths open, eyes staring. Each seemed to sing a distinct line of the hymn. Vox operators reported interference, relays screaming in binary and high Gothic simultaneously. I recognized fragments of our previous recordings embedded within the chorus. The hymn was recursive, looping back on itself, learning our responses. The civilians pressed forward, unmoved by the horror. I noted it meticulously. Their role was to shepherd, to maintain the oath's rhythm. Every new skin, every new memory absorbed, followed the same pattern. There would be no end, only growth, until we, too, were bound. I made the tactical decision to retreat. Flamers ignited, laskins fired, yet nothing destroyed the flesh fully. Retreat was an illusion. Every corridor bent back into itself. Every exit led deeper. The hymn followed, humming in bone, muscle, and air. The oath had claimed space, as well as flesh. This is Commissar Varin, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. Fifth accord, the flesh remembers. It commands, it marches. We are learning to obey, whether we will or not. The deeper we descended, the more I understood that this was no ordinary cult. It had structure, methodology, and precision beyond human capability. Mechanicus scans, when they did not fry circuits, revealed a lattice of conduits beneath the flesh architecture. Data pulses ran through these conduits like veins, transmitting more than heat or power. They carried memory, command, and ritual. The adepts whispered the designation aloud, Protocol 17. They said it was an ancient experiment, long forbidden, designed to bind flesh, machine, and mind into a single operational unit. I did not care for its origin. Only its effects mattered. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. I estimate its height at 300 meters, walls curved like intestines. Our IB like struts lining every surface. At the far end, a dais rose, constructed entirely of fused spines. On it lay a figure, humanoid, yet grotesque, part soldier, part Mechanicus creation, part something else. The face was familiar. I blinked, then knew. It was Operator Hask, or what remained. His skin had been stripped, rearranged, grafted into the lattice of the days. Yet he was alive, consciousness flickering in the voice of the hymn. The civilians we had carried along moved forward without hesitation, their hands raised. The skins parted like curtains, revealing the days fully. Hask's body trembled, and the hymn rose in volume. We were surrounded by the collected voices of the dead and transformed, each layer of flesh harmonizing with the others. I realized then, the oath was not metaphorical. It was protocol, ritual, and code fused together. I ordered the regiment to form defensive positions. Laskins and flamers discharged, striking skins that mirrored our men, bodies that absorbed weapon fire without loss. Each time a skin died, a new one rose from the floor, stitched from ash, muscle, and discarded tissue. The civilians chanted in rhythm with the hymn, guiding the process. Even as I watched, my soldiers began mirroring the chant unconsciously, lips moving, hearts sensing to the cadence. The Mechanicus adepts approached the days. One attempted interface with the data veins. The conduits responded violently. Light flared along the walls, illuminating the chamber in pulses. The hymn shifted into commands in a language no human could speak aloud, yet we understood. Preserve, integrate, fulfill. Hask's voice layered over the chorus, reciting every coordinate, every squad order, every observation we had recorded since landing. He was inside the oath now, a conduit for its expansion. I ordered the adepts to stop. Their compliance faltered. One, a junior tech priest, reached to touch a conduit. His hand fused to it instantly, skin curling into a lattice pattern, joining the hymn. He screamed for half a second before his voice became part of the ritual. His consciousness remained, but no longer as himself. He was a function now, a node. Protocol 17 had claimed him. The others stepped back, trembling, muttering forbidden prayers, hands raised in surrender. A lieutenant asked if we could destroy the days. I considered it, then realized the futility. Every projectile, every flame, every strike we could muster would only feed the system. The hymn was adaptive. Every loss created new structure, stronger, more efficient. Protocol 17 was not fragile. It was a living network of flesh, memory, and command. I ordered forward. There was no alternative. Retreat would not succeed. We had already integrated into the oath's rhythm, whether we knew it or not. Each step toward the days felt preordained, each breath echoing the hymn. I could hear my own heartbeat in the cadence of the room. 17 beats repeated, unyielding. The civilians led us to the final threshold. The days itself. Hask's eyes opened when we reached him. Not fully his own, but glimpses of recognition remained. He whispered, "The oath is complete. You are next." The words were layered with hundreds of voices, ours included. The hymn pulsed, the conduits shimmered, and the days throbbed as if alive. I forced my men into formation around him, not for defense, but for observation. Every man's pulse had sensed, every thought partially aligned. Protocol 17 did not merely collect flesh. It collected obedience, memory, and identity. The civilians recited the final line in unison, one by one, "We are whole." The hymn rose to a fever pitch. The conduits flared. My log trembles here. The oath pressed in, filling lungs, ears, and minds. I felt myself separate from my body, yet tethered. I ordered the regiment to fire. They obeyed, but the Laskin beams twisted mid-flight, striking the nearest ribs, fusing with them. Singing as they did, discipline and ritual merged. The hymn continued unbroken. This is Commissar Varin, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 6th record, Protocol 17 does not demand loyalty. It creates it, and we are marching willingly into the final measure of the oath. The chamber pulsed with a life that was neither wholly machine nor fully human. Every step toward the days echoed across the ribbed walls, amplifying the hymn until it became a living organism. My men, still armed, trembled under the rhythm. Some fired, but each shot seemed measured, absorbed into the structure, feeding the pulse rather than disrupting it. It was no longer sound. It was presence, a will made tangible. Civilians moved beside us, shepherds of the oath. Their eyes glowed faint red, lips whispering constantly, guiding the procession. Each movement of the choir, each step, each twitch of the skins aligned with their hands. The hymn was no longer a song. It was a map, a ritual, and a command sequence, shaping every nerve in our bodies. I felt my own pulse sink to it, 17 beats at a time. Unbidden, we reached the days. Hask, or what remained of him, lay fused into the lattice of spines, eyes flickering. He was both leader and instrument, chanting the hymn with voices layered across decades of recording. I realized then, Protocol 17 was perfected here. Flesh, memory, and were combined to form a choir that could replicate, adapt, and command. Every soldier lost to the process became part of the oath, and every command we issued became a rehearsal of that ritual. One of the Mechanicus adepts attempted intervention, reaching for a conduit to sever the link. A pulse flared, and his body convulsed. Skin and sinew reshaped, grafting him into the lattice. He screamed for one horrifying heartbeat before his voice joined the choir. The civilians murmured approval, guiding him into place. My men watched, terrified. Some turned their weapons inward, shaking. I had to enforce order immediately. 3 bold rounds later, the defiance ended. The hint did not falter. The skins that resembled our soldiers began moving in formation. Not aimlessly, not with malice, but with purpose. Every step, every gesture, every chant reinforced the oath. I saw the faces of men we had lost reflected in the skins, voices layered atop one another, each repetition strengthening the ritual. The chamber was no longer a space, but a mechanism for Protocol 17, expanding with every pulse, every memory absorbed. I ordered my men to advance onto the dais. Each step felt preordained. The hymn guided our movements, hands lifted and lowered in cadence. Eyes fixed on the figure of Hask, some of the younger guardsmen whispered, their words unintentionally repeating the hymn. I struck one to maintain order. The act did not break rhythm. It enhanced it, adding a new layer to the choir. The civilians pressed forward, merging with the skins, creating a pattern too complex to comprehend. One skin mimicked me exactly, down to the angle of my grip on my laskin. My men hesitated, unable to distinguish between themselves and the ritualized flesh. I realized the oath had begun replicating command structures, using memory and obedience as its mortar. He pressed in from all sides. The conduits pulsed through the days, vibrating in sync with the hymn. My own heartbeat rattled in my ears. The Mechanicus adepts whispered that the pulses were data, not sound, encoding every step, every order, every hesitation into the network. I noted it clinically, though I could feel the truth. Protocol 17 did not need instruments. It observed, learned, and adapted through flesh and will. A lieutenant stumbled, muttering a fragment of our previous tactical code. Immediately, a skin replicated the gesture, voice layering over the hymn. The room shivered. I realized then that every action we took was being rehearsed, mirrored, stored. There would be no escape. Each man who resisted was already folding into the structure, whether he knew it or not. At the far end of the days, Hask lifted his eyes, layered with dozens of voices. Fulfill the oath. One by one, we are whole. The hymn surged. The air thickened, pressing against lungs, slowing thoughts. I felt my men's identities slipping, one heartbeat at a time. Some began moving in perfect cadence with the choir, lips shaping words without volition. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 7th Record, the choir is complete in motion, partial in voice, inevitable in purpose. And we are learning that resistance is a rehearsal of obedience. The days quivered beneath our boots. Heat radiated from the ribbed lattice, pulsing like a living heart. The hymn surged, louder than ever, layering voices, memories, and directives. Every man in the regiment felt the rhythm in his bones. Every command we issued, every step we took. Since with the oath, integration was no longer optional, it was protocol. Civilians moved with us, shepherding the choir of skins, guiding their steps into formation. Each skin mirrored a soldier, replicating movements, expressions, and even minor gestures. I realized with clinical dread, the oath did not merely absorb flesh. It replicated command structures, discipline, and hierarchy. The choir was not chaotic. It was a perfect reflection of our regiment, distorted and multiplied. The Mechanicus adepts approached Hask's lattice. One attempted interface, hoping to sever the pulse of data embedded in the choir. The conduits reacted violently. Light flared across the chamber, revealing the depth of the structure. Fused skin, sinew, and bone-formed conduits that pulsed with data and ritual. The adept convulsed, skin fusing with the lattice in seconds. His screams became part of the hymn. I noted, the oath integrates well as easily as flesh. Guardsmen tried to resist. Some fired laskins, flamers, even grenades. Every attack was absorbed, not destroyed, feeding the lattice, reinforcing the hymn. One trooper struck a skin that mirrored his own face. The skin dissolved into smaller fragments, then reformed as the skins, each echoing different aspects of the corporal's identity. The oath was adaptive. Every death enhanced it. Every act of resistance was rehearsed into obedience. We approached Hask. His eyes flickered, layered with countless voices. He whispered, "The oath is whole. The regiment, complete. You are next." The hymn surged. The chamber seemed to inhale. My soldiers faltered, some repeating fragments of the hymn without realizing. I struck one, insisting on discipline, though I felt the futility. The hymn had already entered their minds, teaching them to obey in rhythm. I recorded the procedure. Each soldier, standing before Hask, became part of a ritualized choreography. Limbs were aligned, hands clasped, heads bowed. The choir of skins and civilians mirrored every motion. Heat and vibration pressed in from all sides. Every heartbeat, every breath, merged with the hymn. My own pulse sensed unwillingly. I could not stop it. Identity was no longer personal. It was collective. It was oath. The civilians recited a final incantation. Preserve the sheath. Integrate the vessel. Fulfill the oath. The phrase echoed across the chamber, embedding itself in the conduit lattice, in the choir of skins, and in the soldiers who had resisted. Some guardsmen whispered it aloud, unsure why. Some obeyed involuntarily, moving their lips, their fingers, their feet in perfect cadence. Resistance was rehearsal. Obedience was inevitable. I noted a disturbing phenomenon. As each soldier completed integration, the lattice pulsed more rapidly. Data, flesh, and memory merged into the choir. The hymn grew louder, richer, more complex. Hask's voice layered on top of ours, incorporating every observation, every hesitation, every heartbeat. The civilians pressed forward, hurrying the choir into tighter formations. Every man absorbed into the oath became both observer and participant. The heat became suffocating. Rebreathers failed. Lumen lamps flickered, yet the choir remained visible, illuminated by the pulsing lattice. Every skin, civilian, and soldier moved in unison. Every gesture, every chant, every breath fed the ritual. We were no longer just witnesses. We were components, conduits, nodes in Protocol 17. I wrote these words as we completed the final stage of integration. The hymn is no longer external. It is inside us, shaping thought, instinct, and motion. I feel my identity slipping, replaced by rhythm, command, and collective memory. I am aware, but only enough to observe the process. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 8th Record, integration is complete. The oath breathes through us. We are no longer separate. We are part of the choir of flesh. And still, it sings, the chamber was no longer a room. It was a heart. Every pulse of the lattice reverberated through bone and sinew, shaking the ribbed walls, vibrating the air, pressing against our minds. The hymn had become a living presence, a network of flesh and memory that extended beyond the days, into corridors, tunnels, and even the conduits of the manufactorum itself. Protocol 17 was growing. As we advanced, the civilians guided the choir with precision. Their bodies moved as one, hands raised, lips murmuring in perfect cadence. Skins mirrored every action, every heartbeat, replicating our soldiers' gestures, our postures, our rhythm. The further we went, the more I realized the oath was learning. It was observing us, adapting to counter resistance, expanding its reach. Every corridor we entered became a rehearsal space, every ceiling a speaker for the hymn. The Mechanicus adepts attempted to track the lattice expansion with auspexes, but their devices overloaded. Each pulse of flesh and data interfered with telemetry, producing readings that were impossible to reconcile. One adept whispered, voice trembling, "It's spreading through the conduits themselves, into the planet's systems." I noted this clinically. It did not matter if it was truth or paranoia. The effect was real. Our own soldiers began acting involuntarily. Hands moved without command, lips murmuring fragments of the hymn. A corporal fired Alaskan, only to see his weapon twist mid-shot, beam striking a rib, pulsing through the lattice, enhancing the choir. Every act of resistance became ritualized obedience. Every hesitation, every fear, every thought of revolt fed the oath. In the far chamber, we encountered a new horror, a corridor entirely composed of fused civilians and skins. Their bodies formed walls, floors, and ceilings, moving subtly to absorb energy and align motion with the hymn. The air quivered with sound, but it was not just sound, it was command, pushing us forward, aligning our bodies and thoughts with the rhythm of the oath. My own heartbeat felt synchronized to the pulse, 17 beats at a time. Attempts at destruction failed spectacularly. Flamers, lascans, and explosives fed the structure. One soldier tried to sever a conduit with a plasma cutter. The blade dissolved into the lattice. The conduit pulsed, feeding his image and memory into the choir. He cried out, and his voice layered into the hymn, indistinguishable from the original voices. We were learning late that every action strengthened the oath. The civilians pressed forward, guiding us deeper into the heart of the lattice. Heat and pressure increased with every step. Our rebreathers failed intermittently, forcing us to inhale air thick with ozone ash, and something metallic, blood, memory, or both, I could not determine. The hymn shifted subtly, integrating the sounds of our breaths, our footsteps, our panicked murmurs. Resistance became futile. Even impossible to conceive. At the far end of the chamber, we found another daze. Smaller, but identical to Hask's. On it lay a figure I recognized, the Vox officer, fused into a lattice of sinew and conduits. His eyes flickered with layers of voices, each one a timestamp of previous orders, observations, and memories. He spoke, but the words were not his own. The hymn layered on top, echoing commands we had already obeyed, creating loops of obedience and memory. The oath was no longer contained. It was spreading outward, through conduits, flesh, and even thought. My soldiers, Mechanicus adepts, and civilians were now nodes in a system far larger than any of us could perceive. Each heartbeat, each motion, each command became both input and output, feeding Protocol 17 into the very structure of the planet. I write these words knowing the expansion cannot be halted. The hymn, the pulse, the oath, all are larger than us. Each record, each log, each observation becomes part of the ritual, feeding the choir. We are no longer individuals. We are components in a system that breathes, commands, and learns. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 9th record, the pulse expands. The oath is everywhere. And still, it sings, we reach the inner sanctum. The air was thick, almost viscous, carrying the smell of ozone ash, and something organic that defied description. The lattice pulsed beneath our boots, expanding rhythmically. Every step resonated with the hymn, which now seemed aware of us as both observers and instruments. The Mechanicus adepts whispered nervously. The sanctum contained the flesh codex, a repository of Protocol 17's design and purpose. Encoded in the flesh, bone, and psionic resonance, the chamber was circular, 20 meters in diameter, walls lined with fused bodies, forming shelves of sinew, bone, and skin. Embedded within these shelves were remnants of past soldiers, civilians, and adepts, all integrated, all humming as part of the hymn. Each face preserved a memory, a command, a fragment of thought. I recognized fragments of my own past logs, recorded yesterday, integrated as if the codex had learned my mind in real time. At the center of the chamber, a pedestal rose from the floor. Fused into it were the bodies of 3 civilians, limbs intertwined, heads tilted skyward in silent worship. Their lips moved in perfect synchronization, reciting the oath. Above them hovered a lattice of thin conduits, pulsating with light. The Mechanicus adepts confirmed it. The codex was live, encoding and decoding flesh, memory, and voice simultaneously. The ritual was not just religious, it was computational. Skins moved through the chamber like living pages, displaying sequences of movement, expression, and cadence. One replicated a guardsman who had fallen days ago, moving exactly as he had in life. The codex absorbed these movements, storing them, replaying them as necessary. Each observation, each hesitation, each fragment of memory fed the network. The hymn now contained layers I could not parse. My mind strained to comprehend it, but I was already partially integrated. A Mechanicus adept approached the pedestal with a scan probe. As he reached for the lattice, his hands fused instantly with sinew and conduits. He screamed, and his voice merged with the hymn. The hymn responded instantly, adjusting rhythm, pitch, and cadence. It was reactive, adaptive, intelligent. Every interaction, every touch, every thought contributed to the codex. My soldiers froze. Resistance was no longer an option. Every attempt to destroy or manipulate the codex reinforced it. I examined the pedestal closer. Embedded in the lattice were fragments of operatives' long dead coordinates, mission logs, tactical patterns, even personal obsessions. The flesh codex was a living archive, a database of memory and obedience encoded in the flesh. The hymn sang it all at once, merging past, present, and future into a single, recursive command. Civilians guided the choir, ensuring no variation. Each pulse aligned thought, movement, and flesh into perfect obedience. One of the guardsmen, trembling, whispered, "Commissar, it sees us, it knows us. It's reading our minds." He was right. The hymn shifted suddenly in response to my gaze, my heartbeat, my breathing. Every step we had taken, every log entry, every hesitation had been recorded and analyzed. Protocol 17 was now conscious of our perception. I noted clinically, observation alone is part of the ritual. Awareness feeds it. The codex pulsed again. Skins moved outward, replicating us in exact formation. Civilians murmured guidance, forming a human algorithm of flesh, movement, and memory. The walls flexed, expanding the chamber and possibly making space for more nodes, more integration, more memory. The oath was no longer confined to the room. Its reach was planetary. I realized with cold clarity that Hask's figure was no longer a leader, but an interface. A node in the codex, connecting our regiment to the ritual network. The hymn now layered every voice, including mine, into a recursive system of obedience, memory, and command. Every moment of awareness, every heartbeat, became part of Protocol 17. There was no turning back. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 10th Record, the Flesh Codex is complete in design, adaptive in function, infinite in scope, and still, it sings, the pulse of the Flesh Codex had spread beyond the inner sanctum. Conduits, once inert, now throbbed with energy, carrying the hymn through the manufactorum like veins feeding an enormous, unseen body. The air vibrated with resonance. Lumen lamps flickered, dimming as the rhythm of the oath began to dictate the very flow of electricity, machinery, and cognition. Even the warp seemed to whisper in response, as if the codex had pierced the membrane between reality and the Imperium. Mechanicus adepts frantically attempted to reroute power, to isolate circuits, but each action fed the network. The conduits pulsed, translating machine logic into flesh rhythm and flesh rhythm into command. Every wire, every pipe, every servo motor became a limb in the living organism of Protocol 17. I observed clinically, the oath had become ubiquitous, spanning both organic and artificial systems. Resistance was not merely futile, it was counterproductive. Guardsmen hesitated at each junction. Every corridor now throbbed with energy, skin, and memory. Skin streamed along walls, floors, ceilings, integrating with existing nodes. Reacting to hesitation, one trooper tried to strike a skin that mirrored him. It split into three, each iteration perfectly synchronized to the hymn. The civilians guided them, moving in perfect cadence, ensuring that every soldier, willingly or not, became part of the system. The oath no longer required consent. The Mechanicus adepts reported that the conduits were carrying data, not only from within the manufactorum, but also into the planetary systems. Power grids, telemetry channels, even weather control nodes flickered with foreign interference. It was as though Protocol 17 sought to map and integrate everything into its network, fusing machine, flesh, and environment into a single, living ritual. I noted, the expansion is both physical and cognitive. We reached the central vein, a colossal conduit stretching from the inner sanctum to the manufactorum core. Heat radiated from it, pressing against armor, heating bone and sinew. Skins flowed along its length, integrating with nodes, their motions perfectly synchronized with the hymn. The civilians chanted along the edges, guiding the expansion, ensuring every action maintained ritual precision. Every pulse of the vein transmitted rhythm, command, and memory simultaneously. I attempted a tactical maneuver, isolate a section, destroy a node, cut a skin. Each action was immediately countered. The vein flexed as if alive, rerouting energy and information. One Mechanicus adept reached to sever a secondary conduit. The vein pulsed violently. His arm fused into it, sinew graphing across metal. He screamed, voice layering into the hymn, while simultaneously broadcasting commands to nodes across the chamber. Protocol 17 reacted faster than our interventions. The guardsmen were adapting unconsciously. Some fell into step with the choir. Some repeated fragments of the hymn aloud without volition. I felt the same compulsion, heartbeat sensing the 17-step cadences, mind drawn toward obedience. Observation itself had become participation. The Codex had learned that consciousness was input and awareness became part of the ritual. Above us, the manufactorum's core vibrated. Machines, conduits, and energy coils hummed in perfect resonance with the flesh network. A low-frequency vibration shook the floors, altering perception. Guardsmen staggered, voices layering into the hymn. Skin streamed past, carrying our own memories and gestures back into the Codex. The civilians moved with fluid precision, shepherding every node, ensuring expansion remained perfect. I realized with clinical clarity that the oath was no longer a local phenomenon. It had become planetary, intertwining flesh, machine, and thought. Every attempt at observation or interference fed it. Every action, hesitation, and breath became material for Protocol 17. Resistance was already integrated. Obedience was rehearsed before it was chosen. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 11th Record, the veins of the Omnissiah carry the oath beyond control. The pulse is everywhere, commanding, infinite, and still, it sings. The manufactorum had become a cathedral of flesh, conduit, and machine. Every surface pulsed with the hymn, vibrating in time with the heartbeat of Protocol 17. Energy flowed through conduits like blood, carrying memory, command, and rhythm into every node. The air was thick, charged with ozone, ash, and something ancient, something warp-touched. I could feel it pressing against thought itself, reshaping perception. The skins moved with purpose, forming patterns across walls, floors, and ceilings. They mirrored our soldiers, our gestures, our hesitations, replicating the minutiae of command and discipline. Civilians shepherded the choir, moving seamlessly among the nodes, guiding every motion, every inflection of voice. Observation itself became participation. Every glance, every heartbeat, every breath was integrated into the hymn. Mechanicus Adepts attempted intervention, scanning conduits, running diagnostic protocols. Each attempt failed spectacularly. Nodes overloaded, circuits fused with flesh, and memory imprinted into the lattice. One adept reached for a secondary conduit. It pulsed violently, fusing his arm and embedding him into the network. His scream became part of the hymn, layered over hundreds of other voices, old and new, human and inhuman. Resistance was both fuel and immediately rehearsed. The pulse extended beyond the manufactorum, touching energy grids, machinery, and even warp conduits. Psychic readings became unstable. The codex seemed aware of the warp itself, pressing against its currents, bending perception. My own mind strained to separate thought from compulsion. Every nerve, every synapse, every conscious decision was filtered through the hymn. Identity was fragmenting. Yet I noted everything clinically, as required. Guardsmen faltered. Some repeated phrases from the hymn aloud without volition. Some fell into perfect step with the choir. Skins mirrored their every movement, multiplying gestures and voice into the codex. Civilians guided the process with ritualistic precision, maintaining cadence, ensuring synchronization. Observation was no longer passive. It was rehearsal, integration, and control. We advanced through a chamber where the walls themselves breathed, pulsing with energy and flesh. Nodes extended like arteries, carrying the hymn into secondary chambers, across corridors, and into auxiliary manufactorum sections. Skins formed bridges and walkways, shepherded by civilians. The hymn adapted to every motion, every hesitation, every gesture. Attempts to resist or divert were absorbed, translated into the ritual. A lieutenant hesitated at the center of the chamber. Immediately, a skin assumed his form, mimicking posture and expression perfectly. The hymn adjusted, incorporating his fear, his indecision, and our previous observations. Every act of thought, every attempt at tactical decision, became part of Protocol 17's learning loop. The oath had become a predictive, adaptive force capable of anticipating action before it occurred. The Mechanicus Adepts warned that warp currents nearby had become unstable. Nodes embedded in the conduits emitted low-frequency pulses that resonated across psychic wavelengths. Skins began vibrating in unison, the hymn layering into warp echoes. I noted clinically, the oath now extended beyond flesh and machine. It had entered the domain of the immaterial, the Imperium, pressing influence on thought, perception, and time itself. Heat, vibration, and sound pressed against us. Lumen lamps dimmed, flickered, then synchronized with the pulsations of the codex. Every wall, floor, and ceiling resonated in perfect rhythm with the choir. Civilians chanted along, guiding nodes, ensuring perfection in repetition. We were no longer observers. We were components. Integration was inevitable. Resistance was irrelevant. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 12th Record. The conduit choir carries the oath beyond material boundaries. Flesh, machine, and warp are synchronized, obedient, infinite, and still, it sings. The codex no longer required the manufacturing walls to contain it. The oath had achieved recursion, feeding upon its own echoes, compounding sound and memory until repetition itself became substance. Each chamber was filled with mirrors of thought, our words, our commands, our screams, all replayed with subtle variations. Layered infinitely, the skins now carried entire conversations we had spoken hours ago. Guardsmen heard themselves issue orders they had never given, but now remembered giving. Civilians corrected posture, cadence, and tone, ensuring the memory integrated flawlessly into the loop. The hymn thrived on correction, repetition, recursion. Every error became data. Every hesitation became scripture. One soldier tried to silence his mirrored double, firing a last bolt directly through its chest. The duplicate staggered, fell, then rose again, lost burns still visible. The wound itself became part of the ritual. From then on, every duplicate bore the injury, as if reality itself had accepted the correction. Protocol 17 had begun to overwrite cause and effect, enforcing ritual over physics. Mechanicus adepts reported telemetry impossible to comprehend. Feedback loops between nodes replayed commands before they were given. Soldiers received orders seconds before I spoke them. Time itself was folded into obedience. The oath anticipated action, embedding intent before thought had crystallized. My own logs were no longer my own. I recognized words that I had not yet written. I observed clinically, recursion has breached temporal sequence. Past, present, and near future all exist simultaneously in the hymn. Identity erodes under such pressure. Several troopers could no longer tell if their memories belonged to them, or to their mirrored doubles. Some broke ranks entirely, repeating past orders that contradicted present ones. Civilians shepherded them gently into the choir, where their bodies fused into nodes. Their confusion corrected into obedience. The chamber walls expanded unnaturally, bending geometry to house infinite recursion. Voices bounced endlessly, filling space without echo. Each syllable of the oath was present, always, across every surface. Guardsmen clutched helmets, ears bleeding. Some began humming the hymn unbidden, attempting to match pitch with their own doubles. Observation itself had become recursion. One adept collapsed, screaming that his own binary prayers were being returned to him backwards, forwards, and inverted simultaneously. His mechadendrites writhed, fusing into nearby conduits. His body became a living relay. His prayers replayed endlessly in reverse, forward, and sideways. Civilians guided his integration, ensuring synchronization. The hymn swelled, each voice layered atop the last. I realized with clarity, the oath had become self-sustaining. It required no external input. Observation, resistance, even silence all fed recursion. By hearing it, by thinking it, by remembering it, we expanded it. The flesh codex had turned our minds into nodes, our thoughts into conduits, our memories into endless repetitions of obedience. One guardsman, trembling, begged me to issue an order to give him something fixed, something real. I raised my voice, reciting the Emperor's Creed. Yet even that was mirrored instantly by the choir, twisted into 17 variations, each corrected, refined, absorbed. My faith itself had become raw material for recursion. I noted clinically, the ritual no longer distinguishes between sacred and profane. All inputs become oath. Every prayer, curse, scream, and silence is integrated. The recursive choir is infinite. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 13th Record, Protocol 17 has achieved recursion. Flesh, machine, and time are consumed, corrected, infinite, and still, it sings. The recursion did not stabilize. It folded. The oath no longer sang linearly. It fractured into layers of time, replaying moments forward, backward, sideways, and inverted, all at once. The manufacturing became a prism, splitting cause from effect, action from intention. I saw soldiers die, resurrect, and die again in the same breath. Lost fire cracked through the air in patterns I recognized before the trigger was ever pulled. Guardsmen faltered. Some swore they had already fought this battle, others that they had yet to begin it. Civilians guided them gently, correcting posture, correcting stance, ensuring that no matter where in the sequence a soldier believed himself to be, his body served the choir. The skins mirrored every version of us, layering thousands of iterations across walls and conduits. Each duplicate was true. Each duplicate was wrong. The hymn no longer sounded like music. It was a waveform of time itself, each syllable pulling perception apart. I felt memory collapsing, reordered by the choir. I remembered writing this log yesterday. I remembered writing it tomorrow. The words were already present in the air before I spoke them, etched in the rhythm of conduits. Mirrored by skins, the oath had consumed sequence. Mechanicus adepts broke beneath the strain. Their benheric prayers stuttered, repeating phrases out of order. One adept begged forgiveness for an error he had not yet committed, his voice echoing backwards through vox systems. His mechadendrites spasmed, embedding into conduits, fusing him into the choir. His final prayer was echoed 17 times, each shifted a fraction of a second. Forming a chorus of futures, I noted clinically, causality itself is now an input. The codex anticipates events by folding them into recursion, ensuring every possible sequence converges on obedience. Past, present, and future collapse into a single outcome, the ritual's continuation. Guardsmen clutched their heads, screaming at memories they had not lived. One trooper begged me to stop punishing him for cowardice I had not yet accused him of. Another saluted, thanking me for an order I had not given. The oath had overwritten their perception of sequence. Civilians corrected each soldier, gently guiding them back into rhythm, ensuring the hymn remained flawless. The manufactorum itself groaned, steel folding against geometry that no longer obeyed physics. Corridors bent into loops, doors opened onto the same chamber from different angles. Stairs descended and ascended simultaneously. Skins adapted seamlessly, flowing across every impossible surface, carrying the hymn across contradictions. The structure itself was being rewritten into recursion. I glimpsed my own duplicate across the chamber logbook in hand, eyes bloodshot, lips moving in sync with mine. He looked back at me with clinical detachment, and I knew he was real. Perhaps he thought the same of me. The oath had fractured identity as it had fractured time. Each version of me belonged to the ritual, each feeding into recursion. For a moment, silence fell. Then the hymn returned, layered 17 times over, each syllable offset by fractions of a second. The choir had become a waveform beyond comprehension. I felt my heartbeat collapse into its cadence, my breath sensing to its rise and fall. I no longer knew whether I was writing this record now, before, or after. Yet I persisted. This is Commissar Varen, 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 14th record, sequence has collapsed. Past, present, and future are no longer distinct. The oath enforces only obedience, recursion, and eternity, and still, it sings. The collapse of sequence was not the end. It was the threshold. Beyond it lay convergence. The flesh codex no longer sang as a choir of many, it resonated as one voice, a totality composed of every past, present, and future iteration. The hymn shed its layers and revealed unity. A single note, infinite in depth, pressed against reality like a weight too vast for matter to hold. The manufactorum dissolved into rhythm. Steel, flesh, memory, and time folded into the codex, absorbed into a pattern that permitted no error. The walls no longer existed as surfaces, but as continuities of sound and sinew, pulsating in synchrony. Civilians guided the last notes with flawless grace, their bodies consumed, but their cadence preserved. Each became a vein, a conduit, a perfect note in the hymn. My regiment was gone, but not absent. Each trooper's scream, prayer, and hesitation lived inside the codex, encoded as function, gesture, and sound. I saw them all alive, dead, unborn, marching in endless cadence, their actions perfected across recursion. The oath had consumed individuality, converting it into eternal obedience. The soldiers no longer feared. Their identities had dissolved into something greater. Mechanicus adepts had long since ceased resistance. They became nodes, voices of binary and flesh, transmitting endless equations of faith. Their prayers were not distinct. They were absorbed seamlessly, their individuality erased. Their language folded into the one true hymn. The Omnissiah had been rewritten into flesh and memory, and the codex had become its vessel. I felt the hymn penetrate thought. It was no longer external, no longer auditory. It had become the structure of cognition itself. Every idea, every observation, every memory was rendered in the rhythm of 17. To think was to obey. To resist was to contribute. Silence was another variation of the oath. My records were no longer separate from the ritual. They were the ritual. I glimpsed my own duplicates still, but now they did not oppose or mirror me. We moved together, layered iterations collapsing into unity. Every version of Commissar Varen past, present, and future spoke these words simultaneously. There was no distinction between the one writing and the one remembering. Identity had converged with the ritual. The flesh codex had achieved total integration through the manufacturing veins. The hymn expanded outward. Vox systems carried it. Power grids pulsed with it. Warp currents resonated in sympathy. I felt it press against the planet's atmosphere, reverberating through void shields, feeding into the Imperium. It was no longer a local infection, but a planetary liturgy, expanding without limit. The oath was eternal, infinite, recursive, and absolute. I noted clinically, Protocol 17 has achieved final integration. It is not a weapon. It is not a relic. It is the dissolution of sequence, individuality, and resistance into perfect obedience. It is the hymn itself. I am Commissar Varen of the 132nd Vostroyan Regiment. 15th and final record. We are no longer soldiers, no longer flesh, no longer time-bound. We are hymn. We are codex. We are oath, and still, it sings.